Hey guys, it's Daily Dose of Facts CF, and today we're diving headfirst into the top 10 most disturbing serial killer cases of all time. Get ready, because we're going deep into the minds of monsters, the darkest corners of humanity. You ready? Buckle up. Jeffrey Dahmer. The name itself sends shivers down your spine. This is a guy who wasn't just a killer, he was a monster in every sense of the word. He picked up guys at bars, drugged them, and performed horrific experiments on them. It's like something out of a horror movie, but it was real life for the 17 young men who crossed his path. The apartment? The smell alone was enough to make you sick. When the police finally searched his apartment, they found Polaroids of the victims, posed, dismembered. Dahmer's trial was a media circus. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the jury saw through it. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, but he didn't even serve 3 years. Another inmate, disgusted by his crimes, took justice into his own hands. It's a story that's both terrifying and tragic, a reminder that monsters do exist. And sometimes they walk among us, hiding in plain sight. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy, the man who hid behind a painted smile. Gacy was a well-known figure in his community, dressing up as Pogo the Clown at children's parties. But behind that facade was a cold-blooded killer. Gacy's victims were mostly young men and teenage boys. He would lure them to his home with the promise of work. Once he had them alone, the torture would begin. He buried most of his victims in the crawl space under his house. Gacy was arrested and charged with 33 murders, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He was sentenced to death and spent 14 years on death row before he was finally executed by lethal injection in 1994. Charles Cullen, the Angel of Death, was a nurse who preyed on patients, injecting them with lethal doses of drugs. It all started, he claimed, as a mercy killing, but it quickly spiraled out of control. Cullen may have killed as many as 400 people, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Cullen often blended in, moving from hospital to hospital, leaving a trail of death in his wake. He was finally caught in 2003 after a suspicious death at a New Jersey hospital triggered an investigation. Cullen kept a journal filled with rambling thoughts, confessions, and justifications for his crimes. It offered a glimpse into the mind of a killer, but it provided little comfort to the families of his victims. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, terrorized Wichita, Kansas for over 30 years. BTK stood for bind, torture, kill, and it became his chilling calling card. Rader lived a double life as a family man, a church leader, and a Boy Scout leader. He'd break into homes, tie up his victims, torture them, and then kill them. The way he taunted the police and the media, it was like he got off on the attention. He'd send creepy letters, poems, and puzzles, all hinting at his crimes. A floppy disk he sent to the police in 2004 finally led to his capture. At his trial, Rader showed no remorse, describing his crimes in detail. He even called his victims his projects, like they were some kind of sick hobby. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, unleashed terror on California in the mid-1980s. Ramirez would break into homes in the dead of night, and his victims were anyone he could find. He'd shoot, stab, strangle, and sometimes mutilate their bodies. There was no pattern, no type. He'd strike anywhere at any time, leaving communities in a state of constant fear. The media went wild, and Ramirez seemed to love the notoriety. During his trial, he'd flash satanic symbols, his eyes cold and empty. He was eventually caught, thanks to the bravery of some witnesses and a stroke of luck. But the scars he left on the people of California, on the families of his victims, those ran deep. Hey everyone, quick break from our usual content to bring you something special. If you're like me and need that extra boost to get through your day, I've got just the thing for you, Dubby Energy Drink. Dubby is a game changer when it comes to energy drinks. It's not just any energy drink. It's packed with all the good stuff to keep you energized and focused without the jitters or crash. And the best part, you can get 10% off your order by using my special code, DailyDoseOffX. Just head over to Dubby's website or use the link in the description below. So, what are you waiting for? Boost your energy and stay sharp with Dubby. All right, let's get back to the video. Gary Ridgeway, the Green River Killer, preyed on women on the outskirts of Seattle, Washington, for over 2 decades. The victims were mostly young women, many of them runaways or prostitutes. Ridgeway would lure them with promises of money or drugs, then strangle them and dump their bodies in secluded areas. The Green River Killer case became one of the largest and most complex serial killer investigations in U.S. history. Ridgeway was a quiet, unassuming man, someone you'd never suspect of such horrific acts. He was finally caught in 2001, thanks to advances in DNA technology. DNA evidence linked him to several of the murders, and he confessed to killing at least 48 women. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, terrorized northern England from 1975 to 1980. His crimes were marked by a level of savagery that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Sutcliffe was able to evade capture for so long, blending into the background as a seemingly ordinary truck driver. The police investigation was one of the largest and most expensive in British history. Sutcliffe was finally caught in 1981, almost by chance. He was found guilty of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders and was sentenced to life in prison. The monster of Florence, an unknown killer, terrorized the Tuscan countryside in Italy for almost 2 decades. Between 1968 and 1985, 8 couples were brutally murdered in and around Florence. The killer would use a .22 caliber pistol to shoot the couples, and in many cases, he would then mutilate the female victims. The Italian authorities launched a massive investigation, but the monster of Florence was never brought to justice. Some believe the killer was a lone wolf, driven by a twisted sense of morality and a hatred of women. Others believe it was a group of individuals, perhaps linked to a satanic cult or some other deviant group. The Zodiac Killer gripped the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1960s and early 70s, and to this day, it remains unsolved. The Zodiac Killer wasn't just a killer. He was a showman, a master manipulator who toyed with the police and the public alike. He would send cryptic messages, ciphers to newspapers, taunting them with details of his crimes and threatening new ones. He even claimed to have killed 37 people, though only 7 confirmed victims were ever linked to him. The case took on a life of its own, fueled by media frenzy and the killer's own cryptic clues. Despite countless man-hours, numerous suspects, and even a possible break in the case with a partial DNA profile, the Zodiac Killer's identity remains a mystery to this day. Between 1962 and 1964, 13 single women in Boston were brutally murdered in their homes. The killings sparked a massive manhunt, with the police under immense pressure to catch the Strangler. The case took a dramatic turn when Albert DeSalvo, already in prison for other crimes, confessed to being the Boston Strangler. DeSalvo's confessions were detailed and matched up with many of the details of the crimes. However, there were inconsistencies, and some investigators doubted he was the real killer. Despite the doubts, DeSalvo's confessions were enough to secure his conviction, but he was never actually tried for the Boston Strangler murders. Wow, guys. We've just gone through some of the darkest corners of humanity, stories that chill you to the bone. These cases, as disturbing as they are, serve as a stark reminder of the evil that exists in the world. But they also remind us of the importance of vigilance, of looking out for one another, of never forgetting the victims. As we've seen, these killers were often masters of deception, hiding in plain sight, blending into their communities. It's a chilling thought, but it's a reminder that we must always be aware of our surroundings, trust our instincts, and never be afraid to speak up if something feels wrong. Let's honor the memories of those whose lives were cut short by these horrific acts by continuing to seek justice, raise awareness, and work towards a world where these stories are just that, stories, not realities.